Hello, welcome to Indie Tutorials. My name is Guillermo and I would like to thank the patrons supporting this channel. Let's look today to start building the lock target system. It's going to be a long mini series because we have a lot of stuff to do. So let's start by opening ORK Framework editor. And the first thing we need to do in the base control and input keys is add a key to look at the lock target. So let's create a new key. Let's edit the text and let's add lock on target. Let me spell it right. Target. Okay, and I'll do the same for the GUID as always. Lock on target. Then I will click on the input ID, and the input origin in this case is going to be Unity input action, and we have already made this input action earlier. So we have in the camera section we have a lock target toggle. So let's click on that one to select it, and let's leave it into as down here. So that's everything we need to do here. So let's click on save and confirm, and actually not, because by default every input keys in ORK Framework will try to or will set to be triggered in the fixed update, and that's something we don't need. What is it in fixed update? So uncheck that one and click save again. After saving, let's close it up the editor, and we need to start working with Cinemachine. For the lock on camera we are going to be using Cinemachine as well, and the Cinemachine target groups components. So we need to make some sort of preparation here in the scene just to prototype this, and then we can start cleaning up the system itself, but at least to have something working as fast as possible. What we can do is in the first place we need an enemy to target with. Of course, setting up the ORK combatant for that enemy can take a little longer, so let's just select one of the prefab from the asset pack that we imported. So if you have any other combatant or prefab that you could add, I will select in this case, let me see, variants. I will select one of those. Command inspector. Perhaps let's select the male in this case. Yeah, this one will do. So let's put it in the scene, and we have it here. I will click on F to focus, and let me check what we can do here. It's already on the 0 position. Let's move it a little bit on the set, and then let's rotate it so it's facing us. This is what we need, and I will break the prefab or unpack the prefab. Let's rename this to enemy for the time being, and afterwards I will add a child game object. So create empty, and let's call this one lock target, and it's in the root of the character. So let's just move it somewhere near the chest, perhaps. There we go. So this is everything we need to do here. Let me see. Well, let's not deal with the animations yet. So let's save our changes. We have the enemy that we are going to lock, target lock. So now we need in the player prefab in this case. So let's open up the prefab. We need to add as well a target group component. So let's add a new, create empty, and let's add the name target group, and let's add a component to this game object. It's going to be Cinemachine target group. Okay, so for the position mode we can leave group center. Group in rotation mode, let's select group average. Late update is okay, and then here in the target itself, let's add a couple of targets. The first one is going to be our player camera look. We set the weight to 1 and the radius to 0. The second target is going to be, of course, the target of the enemy. This needs to be set dynamically, but for the sake of prepare the camera and everything else, let's add it in the scene view. So let's save our changes here. The prefab that we have already in the scene probably didn't get the changes, or yes it was, so that's good. So let's make it visible, and in the target group let's select the lock target. Remember, we are going to be setting these target transforms at runtime. In this case, for the lock target from the enemy, we need to change the weight to 0.3, and after that what we can do is go into our main camera, expand the virtual cameras, and we already have this free look camera, remember? So let's reuse this camera. So I will duplicate the camera, and let's break the prefab as well, unpack, and I'm going to name this new camera to CM camera or CM target lock camera. Okay, now of course we need to play with all the settings here. The first thing I'm going to do is select the free look camera and change the priority to 1. Then in the target lock camera I will change the priority to 0. That's the reason for that is if we go back to the main camera and we go and see the Cinemachine brain, it's going to use the camera by priority, and this is what we are going to be switching the priority when we are locked on or on free look. So this is a little bit tedious to configure here, but let's try to do it slowly and just copy the parameters I will be changing. And of course it's up to you if you want to tweak it furthermore to have the behavior you will expect for a lock camera. So let's start. Okay, so because Cinemachine cameras can get messy when you don't have the follow or the look at already set, it's really difficult to configure those. So we are going to change here in the target lock camera. For the follow, we need to follow, in this case, the player, which is already set. But for the look at, we need to set up the target group in this case. Okay. After doing so, we can scroll down, and in the y-axis configuration, we can leave as it is. Same for the x-axis. Recenter to target heading, we can disable this one for now. Now for the binding mode, we have set, since we copy those, let me check. We need to change here in the binding mode for workspace to lock to target no roll. Then let's play with these values here. So the height, I will leave it as it is. For the top rig, middle rig 1.5, and the bottom rig 0.25. Now for the radius of the top rig, I can leave it at 4, the middle rig 3, and the bottom rig to 1. The next thing is in the top rig. If we look at the body, we can leave it as it is. Let me check the aim. Comparing my other project, I have look ahead, ignore Y, and the screen Y to 0.35. Then in the middle rig, what I have is, of course, again this look ahead, ignore Y, and pretty much it. And lastly, in the bottom rig, once again, look ahead, ignore Y. Okie dokie. So let's collapse the components, and let's leave the Cinemachine collider, and we have the Cinemachine input provider as well. Okay. The next thing we want to do is in the main camera component or game object, we are using the ORK Cinemachine Camera Control Wrapper. We are going at the end create a custom one to handle all the stuff that we are going to do now, just as a temporary approach for prototyping this lock-on camera. But ideally, just one component should be dealing all this stuff, and since this component is already set in the follow target and look at target, we don't want two components doing the same thing at the end. But let's start over with creating a new script for this blending that we are going to be doing between these two cameras. So let's go into our scripts folder and behaviors, camera. We already have this Cinemachine look at me. So let's create a C# script, and let's call it Cinemachine Controller, and let's assign this script to the main camera game object. There we go, and let's open up in Visual Studio. So let's add a Cinemachine namespace, and we need to create 3 variables here. So let's add serialize field, private Cinemachine, Cinemachine brain, and let's call it Cinemachine brain. Let's add another one, serialize field, private Cinemachine free look. This is going to be our free look camera. And let's just copy this stuff. Copy paste, and this is going to be our lock target camera. Okay. Afterwards, let's create a couple of public functions. So public void lock camera And what we want to do here, of course, is if we are in the free look camera, we set the priority, not previously, priority to 0, and the lock target camera, we set the priority to 1. Then we make another public function to do the other opposite, so let's call it free camera. And we reverse the priorities, so for the free look will be 1 and for the lock camera will be 0. Afterwards we need to set the follow target and look at transform targets for the lock target camera. So I will create a couple of more functions, so public void set look at, and we are going to pass here a transform, and what we need to do here for the lock target camera is set the look at to this transform. And similarly we are going to do a public void follow target, and let's add the transform as well, and in this case instead of the look at we do the follow. So we can call these functions from other scripts later on. Alright, so save the script and let's go back to Unity. In the main camera, let Unity compile. We need to set up all these fields, so the Cinemachine brain is sitting here. Then we have the free look camera, so it's this one, and the target lock camera. There we go. So this component is all ready. Okay, so what is left now is add code to trigger this transition. When we press the right stick of the gamepad or the tab key on the keyboard, we should trigger this lock target. So for the time being, let's do that, I guess, here in the character movement, because we were already listening to some inputs stuff here, so let's do that. And let's make room here where we have the camera transform, well, perhaps over here. So let's create a header and temporary or temp target. Let's add a serialized field to store the transform from the target. Let's call it target lock. Later on, ORK Framework is giving us this object, but for the time being, let's just prototype it quickly. Then let's add a public bool lock on target and set it to false. So this public variable will the reason for this variable is to use them later on in the state, the locomotion state, the strafe locomotion state, and the dash while locking an enemy. And let's add another serialized field, and in this case we need to store the Cinemachine target group. Cinemachine target group. There we go. So let's scroll down, and we were handling the rotation using the camera transform direction, but if we are locked to a target we need to handle the rotation differently. So let's add a branch here. If lock on target, else. So if we are not locking on a target, we do the standard or the default rotation. Otherwise, let's add a new function, or call it, the method name will be handle target locked rotation. Okay, so let's create this method. And it's going to be basically the same thing we have here. So let's just copy everything, Control copy, Control V. And what we need to change here in the rotation offset. So let's remove all this stuff. Instead of the camera, we need to get the target lock. This is a transform already, but let's make sure we get the transform and then the position, and we subtract the current position of our player to get this offset. And that's it. That's everything we need to do here for the handle target locked rotation. Now down below in the handle movement is where we were listening to the buttons. So let's go quickly to back to Unity, and since we added this new input key in the ORK editor, we can regenerate our machinum constants. And let Unity compile the script. Let's go back to the character movement, and now we can query our asset. You see here we have still the get asset by index, so we could actually do this ORK input. I forgot what's the name of the class. Let me check. Scripts. Where do we put this ORK constant script? Or constant. Come on. Oh, it's in the utils. Yeah. So we were using for the inputs, let me check, ORK input keys. That's the name of the class. So we can use that one, input keys. And this is the one for sprint. Much better. Okay, so let's do similar thing for the lock on target. I will just copy this section and put it here. In this case, if input key get button, and instead of the sprint is the lock on target, we want to toggle the flag. So let's set lock on target equals not lock on target. And afterwards, let's do refactoring a new method, a new function. Let's call update lock targets, and let's make it this function over here. So private void update lock targets. So the first thing is our target lock transform. Again, ORK Framework is going to give us this one, but right now we need to let's say find a workaround to get this target lock. So let's just comment it out by now. The next step is to check in the Cinemachine target group. We need to add ourselves, so to keep it dynamic. Then we need to pass in this add member the weight. We set it to 1 and the radius to 0. We can check whether the target lock is null or not, but in this case let's just try it with add member again, and in this case it's going to be the target lock. The weight is going to be 0.3 and the radius to 0. And this stuff need to be executed only if we are locked on. So let's check this flag we had, lock on target. Then we do all these things. Otherwise, what we're going to do, let me else. What we can check is we have already the camera transform stored here in the cache, so we can get the game object of this transform that is going to lead us to the main camera, and from there we can get the component, and the component we need is this Cinemachine Controller, and from here we can call the free camera function that we made. So let's copy all this thing, and of course this is not the proper way to do it. We are just prototyping this logic, so we are going to do this several times, and the first time we are going to lock the camera. The second is going to set follow target, and the follow target is going to be our transform, and lastly the set lookat, and this is going to be the Cinemachine target group dot transform. Alrighty, so let's work around this target lock, how to get it. The easiest way, I guess, is creating a dummy component that we can fetch using the find object of type, perhaps. So let's do that for the time being. Let's Unity compile, select the enemy, and in the lock target component, let's add a script. Anywhere will do, because this is just for this test. So let's call this one target component, and let me add it to the lock target here. So now if we go back to Visual Studio, we can do a find object of type target component, and from here we can get the game object and then the transform of the game object containing this component. Okay, so let me check. We can go back to Unity, And let's move on. So back in Unity we need to assign here in the player prefab, we have the Cinemachine target group. This is here in the same game object. Let me see what else. This is going to be set at runtime and the camera transform as well. So yep, let's save the changes and then we can disable the player game object. So before disable the prefab, let's do the override apply all. So we know that this value will be kept. Now we can disable the prefab and let's try it out. So if we were to move a little bit and then press the tab key, we are transitioning to the lock camera. Of course it needs to be tweaked a little bit more, and if I press again the tab key we go back to the free camera. I think the transition is too slow, so let's take a look at that. In the main camera we have the blending in the Cinemachine brain. The default blend is set to in out, so let's change that to linear and perhaps reduce the time to 0.25 seconds. That will fix that. So let's try it again. Okay, so we move, and if I press now the right stick on the gamepad, we are in the lock mode. If I press it back, we release. So this is working, but we need to tweak a little bit the camera, which I will do offline, and on the next video we are going to continue making the Strafe state with Animancer. So I hope you enjoying the videos, and thank you for supporting the channel. See you on the next time.